Welcome to the Boardroom podcast. And today we're joined by Laban, Head of Communication at ITER, which is a fusion energy organization, a multinational effort to developing this technology in the energy space. Welcome to the show, Laban.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Tell me just a background, say, of you and the work that you do with the ITER organization, and maybe just to also introduce the organization to some who may not be familiar with this effort, multinational effort in the energy space.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Laban Coblentz. I'm head of communication here. I've been here for, I'm just coming up on my 10-year anniversary. And this is my first fusion project. I would say, if you looked at my resume, my CV, you would say it's the longest I've ever stayed in any job because it's truly an inspiration. What you have here is the ITER project in the south of France is 35 countries working together to try to prove that fusion energy, this source of energy that has so many advantages, but has been pursued for more than 6 decades by scientists and engineers, that fusion energy really can be demonstrated at industrial scale. And so I think there are 2 things that make it inspirational. One is that if we could make fusion energy proven, demonstrated, it would really be a case to replace fossil fuels. It is baseload energy, meaning that it's not intermittent like solar and wind. It has abundant fuel, arguably for hundreds of thousands of years. It's safe. There is no possibility of a meltdown with the physics of fusion. And there's minimal radioactive waste in contrast to, say, what you would see from nuclear fusion. The difficulty is that it's just really hard. The science is proven, but the engineering is really, really hard. And the second reason that it is so inspirational is because there's never quite been a project of any type like this in history, where if you look outside my window to the ITER worksite, you see the 7 ITER members, China, Europe, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, and the United States. And you see, by alphabetical order, China flying, the flag of China flying next to the flag of Europe, the European Union. You see the flag of Russia flying next to the United States. And normally when we hear these countries in the news, they are in some way antagonistic toward each other, trade wars, opposite sides of views of armed conflict, etc. But here at ITER, it's not just like the United Nations where the flags fly next to each other, or maybe the football World Cup or the Olympics. This is where they're actually contributing physical components from really thousands of factories on 3 continents to come together and make a single machine. And there's something very beautiful about being part of a project like that.
Yes. Wonderful. What was the global vision that gave rise to such an ambitious scientific collaboration?
Well, I think it's really, you could call it a project of peace that emerged from the Cold War. In 1985, quite some time ago, when Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev were talking about reducing the threat of a global apocalypse by reducing the volume of the numbers of nuclear weapons in their arsenals, there were scientists on both sides who proposed ITER as a positive project, a project of peace. And so that was really the vision. That was 1985. And within the next, say, 4 or 5 years, Europe and Japan joined quite quickly. And then through the 90s, it was conceptual design and engineering design studies. And there were dropouts and joinings. The US dropped out a bit under Bill Clinton and then rejoined under George Bush in the early 2000s. Canada joined briefly and then dropped out, thinking that maybe it could be the location for the project. And then China and India and Japan and Korea all joined in the early 2000s. So the project was signed, was really kicked off in 2006.
Yeah. And this is about this project is unified about 35 countries. Um, how does such a diverse multinational collaboration actually work on the ground in practice?
Well, it's a complex thing. It's I would say it's like building the pyramids in some ways. These components that are made for ITER, some of them take 5, 7 years to build an individual component. The component, like some of our superconductor magnets, may be as much as 17 meters or 24 meters in their longest dimension, and they weigh in the range of 250, 350, 400 tons per magnet. So this is like a fully loaded 747 jetliner. And you have to ship these from all over the world by sea normally. And they arrive in the harbor close to Marseille in the Mediterranean, and then they are shipped up the roadway to where they come to ITER, and they are then assembled into a single machine. What's notable about that from an engineering standpoint is that you encounter all those changes in temperature, in humidity, etc. So you have to be very protective of these massive components, because when they fit together, despite this huge weight or huge dimension, they have to fit together with a precision measured in millimeters. And so it's a big engineering challenge to do this. And I'll give you one story. China made a magnet, a ring-shaped magnet that sits at the bottom of the tokamak, the ITER fusion reactor. And this circular magnet, when China initially was making it for Europe as part of Europe's contribution, it was going to be shipped on a 45-degree angle. And we had made all the plans based on that. And then China decided that was too much stress, that it should be shipped flat. And the result was that we had to go to the French authorities and say, excuse me, could you actually cut away a bit more of the mountain next to the road so that we have room to bring the magnet up the roadway? So it's really, this is why I say, and of course they did that, and it arrived successfully. It's now installed, but there are some very massive logistical aspects of putting such a project together.
Yeah. And how long you been with this organization, Laban?
I've been here for 10 years. It will be 10 years in September.
Yes, take me through some of the challenges that it may have come that you guys had to deal with in developing this technology. Also, maybe logistical challenges that may arise, because I'm just trying to paint the picture to see what it takes and the magnificent effort that you guys have put into this project.
Sure. I mean, I think for a project of this complexity, I would say it's almost as if there are challenges every day. And when I joined in 2015, there was speculation that the project was going to fail because there were big delays and budget overruns. And, you know, I think when people view a project like this from the outside, that's what they see. Oh, it's not meeting its goals, or it's slow. Think of it this way. For me as a communicator, it's like a 20-year Netflix series, you know, where just every episode, you don't want to end with drama, you want to end with peace and everything successful. But that's not realistic. We specifically chose to do something that had never been done before. We chose to do something that we knew was going to be exceptionally challenging. And then every time that there is a change in a government, you know, right now you would think about everybody is fixated on the change in the US government, my country, in the Trump administration coming in. But if you look at the last, say, 18 months, we've had a change in the Japanese prime minister. We had a change, you know, European Parliament, European Commission went through an election. We had India, going through an election. Modi was reinstated, but still, you have these changes. Korea is still, is still just sorting out its own transition. And every time you have this type of a change, you have to prove to the new government coming in, because we are publicly funded, you have to prove that ITER really is a sound return on investment. And how that return on investment appears to India versus Korea versus Russia or China or another member is entirely different. So, for example, in the last 5 years, we have seen a massive surge in private sector investment in fusion projects. And that's great. That's a really great sign. In fact, the CEOs of a lot of these projects, I would say 10 years ago, there might have been 5, maybe even up until about 5 years ago. And then now we have over 50, because there's just been this surge in private sector investment in the range of $8 billion US equivalent in the last 5 years. And we asked the CEOs, what do you see? And they said, well, this is about the time 5 years ago when ITER's gigantic components began to actually arrive. So the construction phase was well along, but the manufacturing stage was now demonstrating that these components, with their incredible technical specifications, could really be built. And so that was something that gave investors confidence to say, maybe fusion can really be the energy of the future, in addition to all of its great characteristics, in addition to the crunch on energy security, new energy for AI and broadband, or climate change concerns and the need to replace fossil fuels. So we have these incentives that came, but that's not how the narrative goes. The narrative for many journalists and among the public says, well, if you have these private sector companies getting involved and they can build a machine faster, or they can maybe build smaller with new high temperature superconductor magnets or other innovations, then is ITER still relevant? Why do we need ITER? Why do we need this costly, slow project? And those inside in fusion know that there is a really good reason for that. That the reason is because ITER is sort of like a convergent national lab for all the countries involved, and even new countries who have the opportunity or the ambition to join. So ITER is where you do big experiments that can be repeated. We will generate data that's super helpful. But we had to demonstrate that even with the manufacturing phase, we were already helpful. Recently, in the last year, we launched a private sector, public-private sector collaboration, a knowledge transfer project, to demonstrate to these companies that we were willing to open our doors and take the decades of accumulated knowledge and transfer that to the private sector. That's an example of return on investment. Also, spin-offs, where the knowledge that we need for ITER is many disciplines. So it's obviously electromagnetics, but it's also cryogenics, because ITER's magnets have to be cooled to very, very low temperatures. It is robotics. It is metrology. There are probably 8 or 10 different fields where ITER is in the leading edge of technology innovation. This too is a story that we need to tell, perhaps better than we have done, to show why the advances related to ITER, the companies that have worked for ITER, are now using that knowledge to advance medicine, or to advance industry, to advance transportation, fabrication, all of these other fields where, in fact, advances made for fusion can impact other industries. So to me, the challenge, the logistical challenges are, yes, things like, how do you get big components here? How do you make everything fit together? How do you cross language borders?
Yeah.
If you remember the old biblical story of the Tower of Babel, the legend has it that God separated humans and made them all speak different languages because they had ambition to be like the gods. Here it's kind of a reverse. Here you already have 35 languages, many more languages than that are coming together, and they have to find a common language in mathematics, in supercomputing, in CAD drawings, etc. If you walk into the ITER assembly hall today, you will hear French, of course, because we're based in France.
And I'm looking to be there. And I'm looking to be there. In fact, I'm coming there.
You are coming. Oh, Ntlalontle, that would be great. We'd love to have you here.
We spoke with Sabina, so we're also speaking with our partners, Mazars. The French company called Mazars, so they are keen. I'm actually having a meeting with them later on today. But
so does that mean we could have a Boardroom TV live from ITER?
Yes. That's
wow.
Yes, that's what it means.
That would be fantastic.
But please continue. Sorry to interject.
Not at all. No, I'm just saying that when you walk in, what you will hear, for example, in addition to French, in English, you will hear Mandarin, because there's a Chinese led consortium that is in charge of part of the assembly. You will hear Russian and Korean in the cafeteria. You will hear all around here all of these different languages spoken, but we share a common language and a common dream, and that's what drives us forward, despite those challenges.
Wow, I love that. And also the role of AI in these new developing technologies, in the work that you guys are doing, what would you say has been the enhancement that has been brought by this AI surge?
It's a really good question. I mean, you know, like it is for anybody, AI is still, although it's been around for a while, it has really picked up pace, say, in the last couple of years in terms of availability for people who might not be computer scientists and so forth. And we had to learn like everybody else. I think, you know, initially we were looking at, for example, in communication, you know, how do you use AI in various types of research or writing or so forth. But I would say we started working with Microsoft Research and with some others, and it's only a few months ago that we signed a memorandum of understanding with Microsoft Research, and we're using their Studio Suite. We're using they have developed a bespoke version, for example, of ChatGPT that is inside ITER's walls of documentation. So we call her Lucy. We have a bespoke search engine, and Lucy, any ITER staff member can search through millions of documents and find what they're looking for much more rapidly than what our best database system was before. So that's an example. We've looked at the possibility of whether AI can help us with developing better materials, better structural and functional materials that are actually one of the big challenges for fusion, because in the physics of fusion, you have this donut-shaped chamber in which you put a few grams of two forms of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium, which have either an extra neutron or two extra neutrons. Why do you do that? You put them in as a gas and you're hoping to fuse them. But to fuse them, first you run an electrical current through it, so everything becomes charged. That's important because charged particles can be held by magnets. And we have to heat this gas, even though it's only a few grams, we have to heat it to about 150 million degrees, 10 times the temperature of the core of the sun. Yeah. So we can only do that by having a magnetic cage conform to the physical cage that holds it in place. And so if you, even though we're confining it, the materials that line those walls, there's no material that can withstand 150 million degrees. So we hold it with magnets, but still, those materials have very hot temperatures. The neutrons that come out of the fusion reaction and hit those walls are extremely powerful, which is great because that's how we get energy out, but they're also destructive. So we don't want to have to replace those materials very often. And this is where we're hoping, we don't know yet, we're hoping that AI can help us in the research on new materials. This work has been done by AI in some areas of biomedicine, or just chemical research, where you're looking for new materials in other areas. So that's an area we think it can help. We also think that AI can help us on certain aspects of assembly. We already use quite a lot of 3D modeling and advanced digital technology to map out our assembly sequence to make sure because it's highly precise, to make sure that things are installed in the proper sequence, and then to make drawings and understanding of how things are for our records, how things have been assembled, the contrast between how things arrived as built, how they are installed as installed, and so forth. So we're looking at actually I think 4 or 5 different tracks on how AI can help us. But we're still, we've made some advances. We're using some AI daily, but I think we're still in the early stages. AI has so much promise that we're still in the early stages of understanding exactly the ways that it will really help.
Yes, and let's also dive into some of these milestones. Recently you guys achieved some critical engineering milestones. What are the most exciting technical developments happening right now?
Well, I think one that we talked about quite a lot is the completion of our pulsed magnet system, all the components for the pulsed magnet system. So ITER has 3 main types of magnets, plus some smaller magnets for fine tuning. So at the very core, right along the middle of the axis, is what we call the central solenoid. So it's a gigantic cylindrical magnet. It's theoretically, it's powerful enough that it could pick up an aircraft carrier. I don't know how you would hang it on a sky hook, but it would, it's extremely powerful magnet. And that has been built in 6 modules in San Diego in the United States. It needs to be shipped here module by module and then assembled. So the 6th module of the central solenoid recently completed testing in April. And this marked the completion of all of the 3 magnet systems. So there is also D-shaped magnets that go around the donut, around the tokamak reactor. Those were made about half in Japan and half in Italy. And then you have ring-shaped magnets. As I mentioned about the Chinese magnet that was shipped, that goes at the very bottom, and then that one's 10 meters in diameter. Then you have 17 meters and 24 meters in diameter. The additional ring-shaped magnets that were too big to ship, they were actually manufactured right here on site. And then at the top, you have a 9-meter diameter magnet, ring-shaped magnet, that was made in Russia. And the ring-shaped magnets and the central solenoid work together actually in a sort of pulsed configuration. So I mentioned you need to run an electrical current through the plasma, through the fusion plasma. That's done by the pulsing of the central solenoid. But then you also have to control and shape the plasma so that it stays within its confined boundaries as you are heating it up to this incredibly hot temperature, 150 million degrees. So when we finished this central solenoid, the 6th module finished testing, it was a huge milestone because it was the final of all of these magnet systems. So, and it was also a sort of geopolitical marvel because you hear quite a lot, of course, about how it makes the news when Trump has a conversation with Xi Jinping about the trade wars, or when Trump is trying to press for peace in the end of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and he's going to talk to Putin. But here you had magnets. You had a project that was ongoing all the way through all of these different changes in government and conflicts, even armed conflicts, trade wars, where the US and then Russia and Europe and China had all contributed physical components to a system that was going to work in particular harmony. So there are many other examples of our achievements, but this is one that had really embodied the entire nature of the ITER project, both in electromagnetics and plasma confinement, and the hope of making fusion reality a commercial reality eventually, despite these geopolitical tensions ongoing.
Yes. How would you explain to a young entrepreneur or a policymaker why fusion energy matters for the future of civilization?
That's a great question. I think first of all, energy is civilization. Maybe that's an overstatement. But if you look at the countries that historically have been positioned close to petroleum resources, or you go even further back, and you say when we were all still migrating tribes or hunters and gatherers, and you looked at what was so important to us, we wanted to be in a place where there was sufficient warmth, right? We wanted the energy of the sun. We wanted places where we had fresh flowing water. So we were already in a certain way dependent on that. And when it came to fire and to warming our homes, we wanted to be at a place where there was plentiful forest, plentiful wood, way back when. And as we began to harness other forms of energy, and particularly say, the last 150 years, when petroleum became something that we could refine. And so it was not just burning coal, but it was actually refining into this marvelous gift of the gods that was oil and gas. And it really fueled civilization. It fueled the economy. But then we were all trying to figure out who can be positioned next to where the oil fields are. Where is the next oil field that we would discover? And all along, what we were not so aware of initially is that we were putting the waste product from fossil fuels into the atmosphere. Inadvertently, we were poisoning our own planet, our own home, by changing by not just pollution, which made it difficult to breathe and gave you diseases and so forth, but also putting fossil fuels into the atmosphere. So we've been searching for what can be a good alternative. And you look at wind and solar, and of course they're fantastic because the prices have come down. We've learned how to do this in an economically defensible way. But wind and solar are exactly the opposite of petroleum, and even more so the opposite of nuclear fusion or fission, because they are deconcentrated sources. They are operating at a distance of, the distance from here to the sun, where we really get the changes in temperature and atmosphere that bring our wind, or we get the solar rays that power photovoltaic cells. So nuclear, we unlocked, nuclear fission, we unlocked, 75 years ago, something like that, where we've been able to show that first, of course, being humans, we used it for war, but we eventually began to show where nuclear power, fission power, could be harnessed. But we've got safety concerns about that. Most of us who have been in the nuclear field for most of our careers believe that nuclear can be safe, but not all countries agree. Not all publics agree because of the fears of a Chernobyl or a Fukushima or a 3 Mile Island, the accidents that we have seen. So nuclear is still something that we are trying to harness, and I think more countries now are beginning to invest. But then you come to fusion. And fusion, the energy coming from the fusion reaction is about 4 times more powerful than from the nuclear fission reaction. And so, and as I mentioned earlier, you don't have, if you choose your materials carefully, you don't have long-lived, highly radioactive waste. And the reaction in fusion is not a chain reaction, so it doesn't build up decay heat. You can't get a meltdown. And the fuel is deuterium and tritium. Deuterium is present in seawater. So think about the geopolitical implications of that. Every country having really access to the fuel supply for hundreds of thousands of years. Tritium, the other fuel, is very rare, but we want to breed the tritium by putting lithium in the walls so that the neutron that carries the energy from the fusion reaction is also turning the lithium into tritium, which we extract to make more fuel. So if we can make these engineering challenges work, and we have proven all of this stuff at laboratory and small scale. So if we can scale all of these things up, you have a technology, an energy in fusion that can really power the planet, power civilization with an energy that is carbon free, that is abundant, that is safe. And if you think of all the characteristics, I would argue it's also economic. Why? Because we don't actually know the cents per kilowatt hour that will cost for fusion. But what we know is this: if you could take away the motivation, if you for wars over fossil fuels, if you could provide energy to all parts of the planet, not just the privileged parts of the planet, but you could provide energy for all. Think about the economic implications of that. And think about the economic implications of not, as with fossil fuels, putting the waste into the atmosphere, or as with nuclear fission, having the waste that must be guarded for tens of thousands of years. So fusion is just this ideal energy source. And I would say to entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, fusion needs your help in still 10 or 12 different fields. So read about it, and find your ways to invest.
Yes. Talk to also, Laban, to your partnerships with tech giants like your Amazon and Microsoft. How are these partnerships accelerating the project's efficiency and scale? And also, in what ways is data and digital infrastructure just as important as the physical infrastructure in a project of this scale?
Two very good questions. First, I would say that for these big companies, the top companies in the world have been engaged for some time in certain fields like Mitsubishi or Hyundai, or in India, Larsen and Toubro, in the US, General Atomics, in China, the entire SWIP and ASIP that are outgrowths of the Chinese Academy of Science, in Russia, the Kurchatov Institute, more than 100 companies in Korea. And so that engagement has theoretically built a fusion supply chain, because these companies have all had to expand their knowledge. And that's really good, but it's especially good because we have these private sector companies coming out. And one of ITER's responsibilities is to share its knowledge about the supply chain, so that these new projects don't just have to reinvent the wheel and find their own companies and so forth. So supply chain is a very hot topic right now, and Amazon, Microsoft, others joining, that really helps us in building that expertise. The digital infrastructure is so important because you need to share massive amounts of data, and you want to be able to also, in a certain sense, digitalize the supply chain, where you can bring these companies in, bring that knowledge in, share the knowledge, and rapidly exchange. And because so much of this knowledge now is, ITER is a long-term project. So you want to be able to store and retrieve information in ways that can benefit the next researchers, the next R&D that comes up in the fusion global community.
Yes, and fusion energy often gets misunderstood, either as too far away or too risky. How do you, as a communicator, help reshape public perception?
Well, as I said earlier, it's like many decades Netflix series. You have to keep people's interest. I think part of it is inspiration. Part of it, Ntlalontle, you said you're going to visit. I will just tell you, the visit here is the best communication tool that we have. People who come here and have looked at the pictures or looked at the immersive 360 degree photographs or the virtual tours, even that is not quite the same as being here. But I want to come back to one particular point about digital, because I should have mentioned something. Fusion is going to need young people. Fusion is going to need a workforce that comes from all countries, from all over the world. And one of the things that digitalization allows us to do, if you go into the ITER public website and you look under education, we've tried to develop for teachers and students a lot of digital materials that people can use to learn from. So the digitalization of the lectures, of the posters, of the modeling, the ability to print a 3D model of the tokamak, so that you can actually make your own and kind of follow along with us in the assembly. many tools like that are available for education. And education is a critical part, I think, of passing this knowledge to the young people, both as inspiration and in preparing them to be the fusion workforce of the future.
Yes, we have 2 minutes now just to wrap up. You've had a long career, say, in science, communication, and policy. What still excites you? Why are you still in it? And the future that you see, and maybe also in that question, the message you'd like to leave for young scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs watching this.
Yeah, what inspires me, honestly, is my daughter. I mentioned youth before. I think that pretty much every day driving to ITER, I think about the opportunity to leave a better legacy than the one that we inherited, both in terms of energy and in terms of how we relate to each other as human beings and as you know, human beings that don't always get along and aren't always going to get along. Our ideologies, our forms of government, our backgrounds, the way that we see each other as the other, as different. This project and this energy source is an opportunity for us to bridge some of those gaps. And so for young people, I think, this is your future. It's something that you have the chance to make, and it's something that's incredibly inspiring to be part of. So I invite you all to visit and to learn about ITER and to learn about fusion technology.
Yes, and thank you so much, Laban, for your time. Yes, and I'm waiting for Sabina to actually throw up that letter of invitation, and we take the process forward. I'm definitely looking forward to see the facilities over there.
Great. We'll be happy to get it to you. Thank you so much, Ntlalontle.
Yes, we'll talk more on email, yeah?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.